The morning sky hung low and gray, the kind of heavy silence that only comes before something unforgettable. The funeral procession stretched down the long cemetery road. Black cars lined one after another, their polished surfaces reflecting the somber faces of those who came to pay their respects. American flags fluttered at half-staff, their movements slow and deliberate, as if even the wind understood the weight of the day. Soldiers stood in formation, their uniforms pressed to perfection, eyes forward, faces expressionless yet carrying a quiet grief. This wasn't just any funeral. It was for a fallen war hero, a man whose sacrifice had earned him honors that most could only dream of. And among the crowd, standing near the back, was a tall black man in a simple, unassuming overcoat, his posture straight, his expression calm, and his presence almost invisible to those who didn't know what to look for. That man was General Marcus Reed. But no one there, at least no one like Officer Daniel Hargrove, knew that yet. Hargrove had been assigned to manage traffic and maintain order during the ceremony, a task he considered beneath him. He leaned against his patrol car, scanning the crowd with a judgmental eye, his jaw tight, his thoughts louder than the quiet murmurs around him. To him, the funeral was just another inconvenience, another duty forced upon him in a town he believed had changed too much. He had opinions, strong ones, and he didn't bother hiding them. His gaze landed on Marcus almost immediately, drawn not by recognition, but by prejudice. The sight of a black man standing calmly among high-ranking officials and grieving families stirred something ugly inside him, something that had been there long before this day. Marcus stood still, hands clasped in front of him, eyes fixed on the casket draped in the American flag. His mind was far away, lost in memories of battlefields, brotherhood, and the man they were burying, a soldier who had once saved his life. He didn't notice Hargrove approaching at first, didn't hear the heavy footsteps cutting through the silence until it was too late. "Hey," Hargrove barked, his voice sharp enough to turn a few heads. "You don't belong here." The words hung in the air, heavy and offensive, but Marcus didn't react immediately. Slowly, he turned his head, meeting the officer's gaze with a calm that only made Hargrove more irritated. "I beg your pardon?" Marcus replied, his voice steady, controlled. "This area is reserved," Hargrove snapped, gesturing vaguely toward the rows of uniformed personnel and family members. "Invitation only. You need to move along." A few people nearby began to notice. Whispers spread quietly, eyes shifting toward the confrontation. Marcus glanced briefly at the casket again, then back at the officer. "I was invited," he said simply. Hargrove scoffed. "Yeah? By who?" Marcus didn't answer right away, and that hesitation, however brief, was all Hargrove needed to justify his assumptions. "That's what I thought," the officer muttered. "Look, I don't want to make a scene, but you need to leave. Now." The tension thickened. A couple of soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one stepped in yet. Marcus took a slow breath, his composure unwavering, despite the disrespect. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quietly. "I'm here to pay my respects." Hargrove stepped closer, lowering his voice but sharpening his tone. "And I'm telling you that you're not staying. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." What Hargrove didn't realize was that several high-ranking officers had already begun watching the interaction closely. Among them was Colonel James Whitaker, whose expression darkened with each passing second. He recognized Marcus instantly, but he waited, perhaps to see just how far this would go. Marcus straightened slightly, his presence suddenly more commanding, though he still wore no visible rank. "Officer," he said, "I suggest you reconsider." That was the moment Hargrove crossed the line. "Oh, I'm reconsidering all right," he sneered. "I'm reconsidering how long I let you stand here before I escort you out myself." A hush fell over the immediate area. The ceremony had not yet begun, but the atmosphere had shifted. What was meant to be a solemn farewell was turning into something else, something uncomfortable, something ugly. And then, from behind them, a voice rang out, firm, authoritative, and impossible to ignore. "That will be enough, officer." Hargrove turned, his irritation morphing into surprise as Colonel Whitaker approached, his uniform adorned with medals that told stories of courage and sacrifice. The colonel's eyes moved briefly to Marcus, and in that glance was a recognition that changed everything. "Do you have any idea who you're speaking to?" Whitaker asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. Hargrove hesitated. "Sir, this man, he's not authorized to be here." Whitaker's expression hardened. "That man is General Marcus Reed." The words hit like a thunderclap. For a moment, everything stopped. Hargrove blinked, his mind scrambling to process what he had just heard. He looked back at Marcus, really looked this time. The posture, the composure, the quiet authority. And suddenly, it all made sense in the worst possible way. I didn't," Hargrove stammered. "No," Whitaker cut him off. "You didn't." The realization spread through the crowd like wildfire. Murmurs grew louder, eyes widening, heads turning. The general, one of the most decorated officers in the country, had just been publicly humiliated at a funeral by a man sworn to protect and serve. Marcus, however, remained calm. "It's all right, Colonel," he said, his voice steady. "Let's not disrupt the ceremony any further." But the damage had already been done. As the funeral proceeded, Hargrove stood frozen near his patrol car, his earlier confidence replaced by a sinking dread. Every salute, every note of the bugle, every tear shed by the grieving family felt heavier now, pressing down on him with the weight of his mistake. And when the ceremony ended, the consequences began. What Hargrove didn't know was that someone had recorded the entire encounter. By evening, the video was everywhere, on social media, on news channels, in conversations across the nation. People watched in disbelief as the officer's words played back, his tone, his assumptions, his blatant disrespect. The backlash was immediate and unforgiving. By the next morning, Hargrove was suspended pending investigation. By the end of the week, he was terminated. But the real twist came days later, when Marcus Reed did something no one expected. He requested a meeting with Hargrove. Face to face, in a quiet room far from cameras and crowds, the general sat across from the man who had tried to throw him out of a funeral. Hargrove looked broken, his career gone, his reputation destroyed. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus studied him for a long moment. "Good," he replied, "because that's not why I'm here." Hargrove swallowed hard. "I'm here," Marcus continued, "because what happened that day wasn't just about me. It's about something bigger, something that won't change unless people like you understand it." What followed wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was truth. Hard, uncomfortable, undeniable truth. And by the time that conversation ended, the man who had once stood so confidently in his prejudice was left with something far heavier than punishment. He was left with understanding. The kind that doesn't come easy. The kind that changes you. Forever.